Welcome to my talk. Today I'll be talking about how we modernize the Red Hat internal data platform that we have that powers our business. As you all know, Red Hat is not a data company, so the problems we face are very different than what data companies face. The different problems, but thankfully we don't have the problem of scale. We have the problem of how do we get to a culture of practicing good data practices so that we are able to adapt with the current business climate. So what we've been working towards is to figure out how to empower the analysts at Red Hat. And by data analyst, it could be a VP or an executive who really wants to find information that, of course, has to be eventually built to a dashboard the way things have been. We've, of course, been inspired by the improvements over AI, but that's not what triggered it. We mostly want to ensure that folks who need the data should be able to ask for it and get it instantly. And behind the scene, there's a lot of work that we had to do to ensure we could get there. But of course, cleaning the house is important irrespective of what kind of experience you want people to have. It could be dashboards, or it could be, like I said, the natural language experience. So we'll talk about how we got here. Fundamentally, I'll put it out straight. What we need is very compliant and reliable data pipelines, Airflow workflows to be precise. So as a quick example here, we're kind of looking at a page where every morning, Eastern time before our business X show up to office, they have the data ready around renewals, around how we are forecasting for the quarter, what is the state of the current ACV, what the ARR is going on. This data is ready for you to query either as a dashboard or poke holes into it using a natural language conversation. So let's start with the case for modernization, like why Red Hat, which is a 20-year-old company, 20 plus years, had to go through a process of modernizing. And for those who don't know, even though Red Hat was acquired by IBM, we continue to operate as a separate entity. So we have our own enterprise systems. We report our numbers separately into IBM. Because of course, Red Hat started as a company which shipped a disk of Red Hat Enterprise Linux to users. It moved to other areas of business, even to the whole IT structure. And then right now, it's known as a control plane for the world's hybrid cloud environments. So we've had a huge business shift in how we started and what we are doing right now. And of course, the complexities of a at least a maybe 2.5-decade-old company would be the common ones, which we've kind of surveyed within the company, that, hey, we have a lot of duplicate efforts going on within the company. How do we fix that? We have inconsistent practices. And of course, we need to have a mature data culture. And I'll kind of talk about where Airflow played a huge role in ensure that we're actually able to get it done. We're able to ensure we not only modernize the platform, but we also keep the business running. So I'll quickly jump into our architecture, what it looks like. And before that, kind of to talk about when we talk about data platform, we treated this just like an internal open source project. Red Hat is popular for making open source work for the business. So we thought, why not make it work for ourselves as well as a business? So we essentially said, let's build a data and AI platform that works for us, that uses the best in the industry, including Red Hat and non-Red Hat products. And let's build out a data mesh architecture, ensure it's governed, ensure the data sets are compliant. And just like Red Hat sells software which is graded, we have partners who ensure that their products are certified by Red Hat on the platform. We ensure data should also be treated like software in lots of ways. Just like we version software, you do UAT for software. We ensured we build out a platform where you could UAT your data set as a data product. You version your data product. If somebody is using the data product, you know that there's somebody supporting it, just like we use any kind of enterprise software. So we moved to an architecture which was a very conscious decision. We moved away from a lot of ETL to ELT. You might be seeing Fivetran there and wondering if it's actually visible. Hey, that's an ETL thing. But we essentially figured out, should we have to write data pipelines? No. There are tons of good services out there, vendors out there who help, moving data from A to B. Let's just use them. We are a company that ships software products and subscriptions for our customers. We're not a data company. We don't want to do that. So we thought, why not use that? Similarly, we use Snowflake as a data warehouse to be able to get the data in. We use DBT to take the data that lands and gets transformed into, as we call, data products. And of course, once the data is the pristine data is there, supported, compliant, versioned, tested, UAT'd, then we make it available for different kind of use cases like predictive analysis on OpenShift AI, or we build AI agents, we build dashboards out of it. Fundamentally, to keep the whole system running, to make it a well-oiled machine, we use Astro Airflow orchestration jobs, which run on OpenShift compute. So as a company which always prides in being able to not have a vendor lock-in, we actually loved how the fact that we could take a vendor astronomer, get the airflow support from them, and also be able to control where it runs. For us, that was very critical. Um, One interesting bit is, we used to run Astro on-prem, Astronomer on-prem to be precise, and then we thought, we want the whole managed solution because, as I mentioned, we're not a data company. We want to ensure we use the right tools, the right services to make the business work. So we moved to Astro SaaS as part of it, and we ensured, and we kind of proved it out that, we like Red Hat has business with all kinds of super regulated industries. So we kind of validated that can the whole stack support um, a solution where you're for data you're using a lot of SaaS providers. We kind of proved it out, and it actually works great. We also support, as I mentioned, when the whole AI boom happened, of course, the first thing that came to mind is we need to figure out how to represent the unstructured data as data sets as well. So unstructured data could be PDFs in Salesforce. It could be presentations that customers have done to us and vice versa, which we need as data points. So we actually used um, the same orchestration platform, the same mechanism, but with slightly different tool to, like we use Dockling to be able to take unstructured data and make it available inside Snowflake, and then finally make that available as a data set, data product, and of course let entire Red Hat, with the right permissions, be able to figure out how to build, sales assistance on top of it. So you could imagine that, when a Red Hat salesperson goes out and speaks to a customer, they should have all the information about all the previous conversations they had. Now, we don't want them to be searching in a Google Drive or searching in an emails, what the last conversation was. That was an important data point. We wanted to ensure it's validated, no PII information, and that's available in our data warehouse for use by AI agents based on the local laws, for example. So let's talk about some key use cases, like a couple of use cases that where we used to kind of power our internal platform. So the one that I was just showed you, we have about close to 90 to 95 data sets right now today that are being churned out on a regular basis, um, which we are gradually making available for users. And by users, I mean people who should have access to that data to query using natural language. And like I said, the main reason we can trust that system to give you the right data is because we've got very, very complex, I mean, I'm sure there are more complex, DAGs out there, but we've got pretty complex DAGs with respect to, ensuring that when you're trying to figure out if the transaction is supposed to be taken into account for the current ACV, we have to check if that's not a transaction between Red Hat and IBM, for example. Like that shouldn't count as a sale, for example. So we have very complex DAGs that run behind the scenes that ensure that you're finally getting data that you can actually query in natural language and be able to trust it. Because we're not going to be just making this available to, teams of data analysts. We should be able to have, our VPs be able to query this data and make a decision based on it. So to ensure they're able to get the data in near real time and not have to write a SQL query and be able to still, bank on the team of data analysts to do complex work. That's something we found a huge value with our orchestration platform. And I think just a quick background, I didn't probably mention that. As part of my Red Hat, I've been about for 10 years. I used to be in product engineering before I moved on the data side. I used to be a maintainer on the Argo side, on the Argo project. So, I've contributed into Argo workflows. And so, like I said, at Red Hat and even outside Red Hat, we try to figure out what software suits your use case the best. even if we've had skin in the game in another project. So in this case, Airflow looked like the best fit. In so many other cases, Argo workflows look like an amazing fit. And like I said, we not only went for Airflows, we went and found a vendor, astronomer, who would actually be ensure we didn't have to deal with the regular operations of Airflow. Uh, Again, like at Red Hat, we've got tons of people who would be excited to run Airflow themselves. Any kind of complex work is exciting to engineers, but we want to ensure, as a company, we want to focus on what we deliver to our customers and ensure they get our sales folks, our finance folks get what they need um, with the best quality possible. So what we've essentially done here is we've kind of done what we call it democratizing enterprise data access. Previously, data used to be available in pockets. Specific people who I know somebody who knows somebody who has access to the data, and let's find out how to get access to it. We said, no, let's not do that. Let's ensure we have a clear process of making sure people have access to data, and you don't have to be a SQL expert to be able to query that data. If you are somebody who's supposed to have access to it, you should be able to find the answer yourself. Instead of hiring a whole team of data analysts to do a basic stupid question. Like, we should be putting them into doing complex work, not asking every morning what's the current ACV. Sure, you could build a dashboard into it, but then sometimes you want to dig in. What's the ACV of this current region in Europe? That may not be in the dashboard. You don't want to spend another 10 days getting a dashboard built with it. The second use case that we had was a PIA agent. At Red Hat, like I said, we deal with very regulated industries, and at the same time, we deal with our team itself. We've dealt with a lot of SaaS vendors because, like I said, we moved away from trying to run everything ourselves to choosing the best in the industry with respect to a vendor for any project or any product. So we needed to do something like a privacy impact assessment, which any company operating in the US has to adhere to as part of a federal standard. Um, Typically, an operation like that, an effort like that, took a lot of time because there was a lot of back and forth between users. But now, given the fact that we have data that's reliable, available in our platform, we could essentially, make that a conversational experience where you don't need 15 days to confirm if the PIA supervisor got all the right data. The data, where when it gets to him, he's sure that he can trust it because there are assigned data product owners. There are assigned checks. There's a UAT that has happened on the data. So you know that every PIA assessment that comes through has gone through some checks already. As I previously mentioned, to be able to do that, we had to use actually a lot of unstructured data. And we do the typical, vectorize, generate embeddings, etc. And again, we've explored many options to figure out how to build out a pipeline. And I also happen to be involved in, let's say, Tecton pipelines and the Tecton project. So, when we've done Jenkins, Tecton, Argo workflows, and as part of a day job, you'd be very tempted to try to use something like that. But we figured out, Airflow is, again, the best in the business to be able to get us what we need from a data perspective. Now, the biggest question is really, how did we get there? I kind of showed you the architecture, which is great, which is all cool, but to be able to move 20 to 25 years of, incremental changes we've done in a data platform, which served our business great over time, no doubt. But if you have to adapt with what's happening in the market today, if you have to ensure that we get quicker answers to questions that would help drive business, what do we do there? So, of course, I think one thing which was pretty obvious that we moved to a data mesh architecture. We define data products, data sets as source aligned and aggregate. Source aligned is basically, let's say you have a source system like Salesforce. You would have the data available as a source aligned data product. And then other aggregates could consume that data set to build their own data sets. Just like in computer science, if you're building an API on top of an API, you need to bank on backward compatibility. We ensured all those rules and regulations were put in place when you define source aligned and aggregate data products. Again, this is a pretty common thing in the industry. Probably you folks know about it for sure. But just want to call out that, while we wanted to do something revolutionary by modernizing our data platform, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are good things out there. You can take it. And I think that's what we did. But the key thing that came to our mind is, a lot of folks here, in my team have contributed to open source all their lives. And, of course, it's not attractive to ask an engineer, okay, after 10 years of open source, let's build a super internal platform that only your team knows about. So, we kind of rationalize that, if you're releasing general purpose software, and we weren't, you should consider open source. But then if you're working with sensitive data in a risk-averse industry, you should then consider inner source. What that meant is we've had lots of duplicate efforts within the company, just like any other big company, where you have teams who go on with their own data solution because it serves purpose, it's fast, you don't have to go through lots of hoops. But we built a model of contribution the way, for example, the Airflow project works, right? It's an open source project. You would have a team of maintainers for every component in the Apache, for every project in the Apache suite, for every Airflow sub-project. You would have a technical oversight committee. Uh, I don't think the Airflow project or the Airflow sub-projects today are organized in sprint teams, right? They're basically based on contributors who have an interest, who have a skin in the game to contribute to a specific project. That's how we defined who works on our data sets. And because all of it was done using something like DBT, we kind of we could essentially say, let's do data transformation as code. So once the data lands in our warehouse in Snowflake, we defined the transformations as DBT, and in production, we had those transformations executed by Airflow to kind of ensure that, unlike software where things can break if code changes, in the data world, things can break if your code changes, things can break if your data changes. So we definitely need to ensure we have a different mechanism to tackle that. Of course, we for orchestration we went ahead and used Astronomer Cosmos because the fact that we put our eggs in the DBT basket, and when you're using DBT, we needed to ensure that we used something that's natively first class built for DBT on Airflow. And of course, for us, the most important thing is it still had to work in a multi-vendor stack. And as I mentioned, we use OpenShift as a compute for running those jobs. The interesting bit about the third point, observability, as a company which prized for being open, we had the situation where folks said, hey, I have no clue if the quarter closing is going well. And I said, well, you have to be a part of the workspace in Astronomer for that. And then they said, no, there's something called Astro Observe. And then, wow, that worked for us. So, while we didn't start with it, we realized that, the huge value of vendor solutions built on top of open source projects to be able to ensure that you can make things work for the enterprise. Like as an example, my super boss has no business being in a workspace or having edit privileges in, for a deployment. But then he cares about knowing whether the sales numbers are being generated or whether the DAC has failed. Before, we had to get him access to something where even though he's not a maintainer, not an approver, not a contributor, but with Astro Observe, we could ensure more people, like we could potentially have the entire company log into Astro and be able to see if the numbers are being computed fine. You don't have to see the numbers, but you need to be able to know whether your quarter closing is going fine, because it does impact sales, finance, marketing, a bunch of functions in the Red Hat side. And of course, we continue to be very paranoid about how we handle security. We had we have our whole internal infrastructure with OpenShift, with lots of checks and balances and configurations built in. We wanted to continue using it and not give those up. When we moved from, let's say, our on-premises to SaaS solution, we could continue using that. With that, I'll stop there. My name is Shoubhik Bose. I work as a senior principal software engineer, as I was introduced. I lead the data architecture. I lead the technical architecture for our data platform. Thank you for listening in.